The air is thick with moisture, long before the sun even thinks of rising. The reeds along the riverbank whisper in the faint breeze, and the surface of the Nile lies dark and patient, a mirror of the sky that has yet to pale. Somewhere behind the cluster of clay huts, a rooster calls, sounding too eager for this hour. You shift under your woven blanket and sit up slowly, feeling the faint chill of the damp air on your skin. The ground beneath your feet is cool, packed with years of footsteps and traces of fish scales that have fallen and been trampled into the earth. You rub your eyes, yawn, and listen to the night preparing to end. Crickets fade, frogs grow quieter, and soon the low grumble of the river takes their place. It is not a loud sound, but a wide one, as if the earth itself were breathing. Your hut is small, the walls made of sun-baked mud and straw, with faint cracks that let in thin lines of pale starlight. In the corner, a net hangs from a peg, still damp from yesterday's work. Beside it sits your reed paddle, smooth and worn from years of use. The faint scent of fish oil and smoke lingers on everything. You glance toward the doorway and see a faint orange glow outside. The fire pit near the river still burns from last night's cooking. Someone must have risen before you. Probably Mena, your neighbor, who is always early, always talking about how the best fish come to those who greet the dawn first. You stretch your back, pull your rough linen kilt around your waist, and reach for the small amulet that hangs from a cord near your bed. It is shaped like a fish, carved from bone. You rub it between your fingers for luck, as your father used to do. He told you once, before his last voyage, that the Nile listens to those who whisper gently to it. You whisper something now, nothing specific, just a quiet hum meant to keep the morning soft. So, before we sink deeper into this moment, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now, let the light dim, let the fan hum quietly, and let's drift into tonight's story together. You step outside, and the cool air greets you with a faint mist. The smell of wet reeds and distant silt fills your lungs. The river, broad and shimmering even in darkness, stretches like a long black ribbon toward the horizon. The stars fade slowly, one by one, as a faint grey-blue creeps upward. Near the water's edge, you see Mena bending over his basket, muttering to himself. His shape moves like a shadow against the faint light. You walk quietly toward him, your feet sinking into the damp earth. You are late, he murmurs without looking up. Just enough to let the fish grow lazy. You reply, and he chuckles softly. Together, you both look toward the water. In the dim glow, a few fish ripple near the surface. Small silver flashes dart beneath the reeds. The current is calm today, no sign of the wind that often stirs trouble. Mena squats and opens a clay pot. Inside lies a smear of dark mud, mixed with crushed herbs. For luck, he says, smearing a little across his forehead. You do the same, though you both know it smells more like superstition than success. Yet the act feels right. The Nile respects ceremony, even the simple kind. Historians still argue whether fishermen of your time truly believed the river had a soul, or if they only said so to please the temple priests. But, in the quiet before dawn, belief feels less like a choice and more like a natural state of being. You do not think about faith. You just feel the river watching you. You crouch near your small reed boat. It rests, half submerged in the shallow water, tied loosely to a wooden stake. The reeds creak softly as you touch them. The boat is light but strong, patched many times with bundles of fresh papyrus. A small clay lamp sits at the bow, still unlit. You will light it once you reach the open current, where the darkness needs taming. You check your nets, finger the knots, and shake out yesterday's bits of weed and shell. The rope fibers are rough against your skin, and your nails catch on a few loose strands. It is familiar work, the kind that does not need thought. Every movement carries memory. Your father's hands once did the same, and his father's before him. A pale heron lifts from the reeds nearby, wings whispering against the morning air. You watch it rise until it disappears into the grey. The first streaks of dawn touch the water, faint pink and gold weaving through the surface like drifting oil. The river seems to wake all at once, the soft sound of rippling growing stronger as the light spreads. A group of boys runs down from the village, carrying buckets and laughing too loudly for the hour. One of them waves. You nod back, remembering when you used to be one of them, when the river was just adventure, not survival. Behind you, the huts glow faintly with the rising sun. Smoke curls from a few small fires. The scent of baking barley bread drifts faintly through the air. The day begins in layers. Smell first, then sound, then color. You take it all in slowly, savoring the calm before the pull of the current takes over. A frog croaks nearby. The water swirls against your ankles. You breathe in the Nile again, deep and patient, the way you might breathe in a story before telling it. In moments like this, the river feels ancient, as if it remembers everything. The rise and fall of dynasties, the laughter of fishermen long turned to dust, the soft voices of priests reciting prayers to the sun. You wonder, briefly, if the river itself dreams, and whether it dreams of you. The sun's edge touches the horizon, spilling gold across the world. The reeds glow in its light, and the shadows of boats stretch long across the surface. The day is beginning, slow and steady, as it always does. You lift your paddle, place a hand on the rim of your boat, and smile faintly at the stillness. Somewhere upstream, someone's child laughs. A rooster calls again, and the wind smells faintly of rain that might not come. You step into the boat. The papyrus creaks softly, welcoming you back. The river stirs underfoot, patient and alive. The papyrus boat sways gently beneath you as you crouch to check the bindings. Every morning begins like this, with a quiet ritual of inspection. The knots must be tight, the reeds must hold, and the thin wooden frame beneath must show no sign of splitting. The Nile forgives many things, but not carelessness. You pull at the cords, listen to the groan of wet fibers, and nod in satisfaction. Beside you, the shallow water ripples with the slow pulse of the current. Bits of floating debris drift by, fragments of lotus leaves, a feather, a scrap of bark. You scoop one away and watch it spin in a small circle before the current carries it off again. The world here moves on rhythms so patient that most people never see them, but you do. You have lived by these patterns all your life. Mena is still near his hut, mending the corner of his net. His wife calls something from behind him, but the words blur into the soft hum of the morning. The sun has risen just high enough to color the mist pale gold. You can see the opposite bank now, a thin line of trees. their leaves trembling slightly in the breeze. Your hands move automatically, reaching for the small charm tied to the bow. It is a strip of linen with a few beads threaded through it, something your wife made during the last flood season. She said it would keep the spirits of the drowned away from your boat. You don't know if it works, but you tie it tighter anyway. The habit is comforting. Even the most practical fisherman likes to think the unseen world might be kind sometimes. The smell of tar and damp reeds rises as you lean closer. A cluster of dragonflies hovers above the water, wings catching the early light like shards of glass. You pause to watch them, your mind drifting to strange thoughts. How such small things never seem afraid of the river that has taken so many lives. Perhaps ignorance is a kind of peace. Historians still argue whether these early boats were truly made of papyrus or of imported cedar disguised beneath papyrus wrapping. You find the debate amusing, because, to you, it doesn't matter. A boat is a boat. It floats, or it doesn't. The scholars in their bright white robes can argue about the truth all they want. You, however, must make sure your vessel doesn't sink before breakfast. You dip a clay bowl into the water, letting it fill, and pour a thin stream over the side of the boat. The reeds hiss softly, expanding with moisture. That's the trick. A papyrus boat must stay wet, or it will dry and crack in the sun. You learned that the hard way when you were young, watching your first boat crumble in your hands like old parchment. Mena calls out from across the small inlet, "Going far today? Far enough to forget your voice?" You reply with a grin. He laughs, waving his hand in mock offense. You grab your oar and push away from the shore. The boat slides forward, gliding through the shallow reeds with a soft, sighing sound. The world opens up in front of you. Behind, the village shrinks. The huts become small bumps of earth. The smoke, thin threads against the brightening sky. Ahead, the river stretches wide and glimmering, dotted with faint shapes of other boats beginning their day. You paddle slowly, each movement deliberate and quiet. The water parts before you in smooth ripples that spread outward, catching the morning light in shifting patterns. The surface smells faintly of fish and sun-warmed silt. You watch bubbles rise and burst, leaving tiny circles that vanish almost as soon as they appear. The rhythm of the paddle and the water becomes hypnotic. Push, glide, breathe. Push, glide, breathe. Your mind settles into the repetition, and thoughts wander freely. You think of your children still sleeping, of the clay pots your wife will take to market, of the sound of frogs that will fill the air when night returns. Everything feels cyclical, endless, like the turning of the river itself. There's a strange comfort in this. Some say that the Nile is not just water, but time itself, always moving, never ending, carrying the past quietly beneath the surface. Somewhere down there, the bones of old kings and forgotten fish mix together. The thought makes you smile. Even the greatest of men end up feeding the catfish eventually. You pause to adjust your net, coiling it neatly beside you. The rough hemp scratches your fingers, but you hardly notice. The movement is too familiar, too old. The boat drifts on its own for a while, carried gently by the current. On the far bank, a farmer leads his oxen along a narrow strip of wet soil. You watch him pause, raise his hand toward the river, and murmur something under his breath. Maybe a prayer, maybe a curse. You can't hear the words, but you recognize the tone. Everyone speaks to the Nile at some point. It is impossible not to. A sudden splash nearby startles you. You turn quickly, heart thudding, but it's only a large fish breaking the surface before vanishing again. The ripples move toward your boat, bumping softly against the reeds. You laugh under your breath. For a moment you thought it was a crocodile, though they rarely come this close at dawn. Still, you never quite stop thinking about them. The reeds part ahead as the current strengthens. The sound changes, deepens. The faint hiss of shallow water becomes a steady, low hum. The Nile is waking up. Birds swoop overhead, calling sharply to one another. The air warms fast, carrying the scent of wet clay and flowering papyrus. You take a deep breath, leaning back slightly to stretch. Your shoulders ache from the constant motion, but it's the kind of ache you've grown to enjoy. Work that hurts means work that matters. You glance down into the water and see your reflection, bent slightly by the ripples. Eyes dark, face drawn by sun and wind. You look older in the water than you do in your wife's eyes, but perhaps that's how it should be. A fringe detail you once heard from an older fisherman comes to mind, that the spirits of the river sometimes test men by showing them their true faces in the water. If the face smiles back, they say, the man will live another season. If not, he should stay on land. You chuckle softly at the memory, shake your head, and dip the paddle again. The reflection disappears in waves. The first proper beam of sunlight breaks through the horizon then, striking the surface in a long golden path that leads straight ahead. It feels like the river is drawing you forward, calling you. You follow, your paddle cutting gently into the glowing water. Somewhere in the distance, the faint sound of a temple gong drifts across the fields. Morning prayers to Ra have begun. The priests in white linen will soon lift their hands toward the sky, asking the sun to bless another day. You raise your paddle slightly in a quiet salute. Whether the gods listen or not doesn't matter. The act of acknowledgement feels enough. You check your nets once more, securing them against the boat's side. The knots are strong, the cords freshly tarred. The work of preparation is nearly done. The rest belongs to the river. As you drift onward, the sun climbs higher, and the mist begins to lift. The water glitters now, every small wave catching the light. You squint against the brightness, the world slowly turning from gold to blue. The day has truly begun, and so has your search for the morning's catch. The current moves stronger now, and your paddle dips deeper with each pull. The sound of the water changes from a soft whisper to a low, rhythmic murmur, like breathing made visible. You steer the papyrus boat toward the wider stretch of the river, where the reeds thin out and the open current begins. The light of the early sun spills across the surface, turning it a pale gold that shimmers with every small motion. The river looks alive, restless, filled with hidden movement beneath its calm appearance. You can see the flicker of fish darting just below the waterline, flashes of silver and bronze slipping between shadows. You move slowly, letting the current carry you rather than fighting it. The paddle rests across your lap for a while. You lean back slightly and take in the landscape around you. The banks rise gently on both sides, patches of green broken by stretches of soft mud where birds stand on thin legs, still and alert. In the distance, palm trees form dark silhouettes against the brightening sky. There is a faint hum in the air, a mix of insects, wind, and faraway human voices. The river is never truly silent. Even when no one speaks, it feels like the world itself is murmuring beneath the surface. A group of fishermen's boats is visible ahead, their shapes small and dark against the light. You recognize some of them. Mena's boat, of course, slightly crooked on one side. Another belongs to an older man named Hapu, who claims he can smell where the fish are. Though most suspect he just follows Mena. You smile to yourself at the thought. You adjust the nets beside you, spreading them carefully over your knees. The hemp feels rough but familiar. Each knot tells its own story. A repair made last season, a new tie added just last week. The net smells of old fish, river water, and smoke from the drying racks back home. It is the scent of your life. As you drift farther into the open water, the color deepens. The pale gold becomes a stronger blue, touched with streaks of green from the reflection of reeds and trees. The air grows warmer, though the occasional cool breeze still slips off the surface. You close your eyes for a moment, letting it brush against your face. When you open them again, a pelican glides low over the water, its shadow passing across your boat. It lands nearby, folding its wings and watching you with quiet intelligence. You meet its gaze briefly, both of you acknowledging the other as part of this place. The bird clucks once, then dives, disappearing beneath the water with barely a splash. When it resurfaces, a small fish wriggles in its beak. You can't help but laugh. Show off, you mutter. Historians still argue whether these birds were truly revered in the Delta villages or merely tolerated as rivals. Some wall carvings show fishermen feeding them, while others depict them being chased off with sticks. You've never hit one yourself. They are fellow workers, just faster and less patient. The sound of another paddle reaches you from nearby. You turn slightly and see Mena's boat gliding closer. He grins, lifting his paddle in greeting. "Plenty of fish today," he calls. "The gods are kind. The gods always favor the one who talks too much," you reply, though the humor in your tone softens the words. He laughs and steers away again, heading toward a patch of rippling water where the fish seem active. You watch him go, the rhythm of his movements steady and strong. Then you return your gaze to the open current. You take your paddle again and push forward, letting the boat move into deeper water. The color of the Nile darkens, its surface glassy and smooth. You glance down, seeing faint shadows far below, schools of fish moving in synchronized patterns, shifting like clouds under the surface. It's mesmerizing, and you find yourself slowing the boat just to watch them. Sometimes, when the light hits just right, you can see more than fish. Shards of broken pottery, the gleam of a lost tool, even a glimpse of old stone, remnants of something ancient buried in the silt. The river hides its treasures well. The priests say it keeps the past safe until the world is ready to remember it. You like that idea. It makes every ripple feel sacred. A small boat passes from the opposite direction, carrying two young men you don't recognize. Their nets are smaller, their arms leaner. One of them nods respectfully. You nod back. They are likely from another village downstream, sent by their fathers to learn patience from the river. You hope the Nile is gentle with them. The current shifts again, stronger now, and your boat tilts slightly. You adjust your weight and guide it with the paddle until it steadies. The water ahead glitters so brightly it almost hurts to look at. You squint and lift your hand to shade your eyes. Somewhere in the distance, a line of lotus flowers marks the edge of a shallow patch. Their petals are open, pale pink and white, swaying gently with the motion of the water. You steer toward them, careful not to crush their stems. The scent that rises is faint but sweet, fresh, clean, like rain before it falls. The lotus has always been your favorite sight on the river. Some say they open with the sun and close with its setting because they remember creation itself, the first light rising from the dark waters. You do not know if that is true, but it feels right. The river seems older than stories. A heron cries from the bank, long and echoing. You glance toward it, watching as it lifts into the air and circles once before vanishing into the haze. The sound fades into the wide emptiness of morning. You place the paddle across your lap again and let the boat drift. The movement is barely noticeable now, as if the river itself is carrying you where it wants. Time feels slow here, stretched thin across the water. You could sit like this forever and not feel the hours pass. Somewhere nearby, a frog croaks. Another answers. You smile faintly. The Nile Delta always wakes in conversations. Even the smallest creatures seem to speak in rhythm with the flow. You reach into the water with your hand, feeling the cool silk of the current slip between your fingers. The touch grounds you, connects you to something beyond understanding. Every morning feels new, but also the same. A pattern repeated endlessly, like breathing. That is the comfort of this life. You take one last look at the distant banks, now softened by the haze of heat rising from the surface. The world seems to blur at its edges, as if the line between land and water, man and river, has been erased for a while. You lift the paddle again, guiding your boat toward the place where the current slows and the fish are known to gather. The day is calling you forward, and the Nile, as always, answers in silence. You let the boat drift for a few quiet moments before reaching for the nets. They rest folded beneath a clay jar near your feet, the cords coiled neatly like sleeping snakes. You lift them slowly, feeling their weight heavier when wet, softer when warm. The sun has risen higher now, turning the mist into bright ribbons that curl over the surface of the Nile. You squint against the glare, your hand shading your brow as you search the water for movement. The fish prefer the edges of light and shadow, where reeds and lilies break the surface. The trick is not to chase them, but to wait, to know their rhythm better than they know yours. The first cast of the morning is always done with care. You gather the net, fold it over your arm, and whisper the same quiet words your father once did. They are not a prayer, not exactly. More like a promise. A promise to take only what the river gives, and to thank it properly afterward. With a steady breath, you swing your arm and let the net fly. It spreads in the air like a great wing before settling on the surface with a soft splash. Ripples spread outward, circles widening until they fade. The sound blends with the heartbeat of the river, steady, low, endless. You rest the paddle across your lap and wait. The silence between casts is its own kind of work. The river seems still, but you know better. Beneath the surface, movement stirs. Fish glide through the light, testing the edges of the net. The waiting stretches, long enough for your thoughts to drift. You remember being a child, sitting beside your father's boat. He used to say that patience was heavier than the catch itself. Anyone can throw a net, he told you, but only those who wait can bring it back full. You did not understand him then, but you do now. You pull the rope slowly. The net resists at first, then yields, sliding through the water with a smooth, heavy sound. When you lift it, sunlight glitters on the scales of half a dozen small fish caught between the cords. Their tails flick weakly, flashing silver before going still. You drop them into the clay jar beside you. It fills with a faint splash and a scent of living salt. Mena's laughter drifts across the water. You glance up and see him raising a net high, fish wriggling in the air like coins spilling from the hands of a lucky gambler. Ra smiles on me today, he shouts. Ra always smiles on fools. You reply, though your grin betrays your words. He waves and goes back to his work. The sound of paddles and nets continues, scattered across the river like gentle percussion. The air fills with bird calls, the splash of water, the hum of insects rising from the reeds. Historians still argue whether fishing was considered a noble trade in your time or simply a necessity for the lower classes. The temple murals show fishermen offering their catch to the priests, sometimes with reverence, sometimes with clear exhaustion. You think of this while watching the sunlight dance on your nets. Perhaps nobility is not in the work, but in the patience it demands. You throw again. This time the cast lands farther out, the net spreading wide before sinking beneath the surface. You pull the rope gently, keeping the tension even. The feel of the line in your hand is almost musical. Every tug, every vibration tells you something about what lies below. As you haul it in, the net feels heavier. You lean your weight backward, the papyrus boat creaking softly beneath you. Then the surface breaks. A larger fish thrashes wildly, scales flashing like tiny mirrors. You grip the line tighter, murmuring under your breath until it stills. The jar beside you fills quickly now, the morning's catch beginning to take shape. You pause to wipe sweat from your forehead. The heat grows faster than you expect, the sunlight pressing down like a steady hand. The air smells thick with silt and waterweed. Somewhere nearby, a group of boys shout and laugh, young apprentices learning the trade, throwing their small nets with more enthusiasm than skill. You smile, remembering the same recklessness in your own hands years ago. One boy's net tangles midair and falls back over his head. His friends laugh so loudly the birds scatter from the trees. You laugh too, shaking your head. The Nile is generous to those who treat it kindly, but never to those who hurry. A fringe story passes through your mind. One your grandfather told about a fisherman who threw his net in anger and caught only shadows. When he pulled it back, the net was filled, not with fish, but with black water that whispered to him all night until he lost his voice forever. You never knew if that was a warning or just a bedtime tale. But even now, you cast carefully, never angrily. The sun climbs higher, the golden reflection, now too bright to look at directly. The water seems alive, with color, light bending and flickering, as if the river itself breathes. You squint toward the far shore and see movement, a herd of cattle crossing the shallow flats. Their bodies half submerged. A few ibis birds follow, picking at the surface insects stirred up by the herd's slow progress. The scene feels eternal, like a painting repeated through generations. You take another sip of water from the small clay jug near your feet. It's warm now, but refreshing all the same. You pour a little onto your hands, wiping away the grit and smell of fish. The wind picks up slightly, rippling through the reeds, making them sway in soft unison. You throw the net one last time for the morning. The motion feels natural now, effortless. The rope unfurls like part of your own body. It lands perfectly, a clean, full circle expanding across the gleaming surface. You let the silence hold again. Far beneath, you imagine the fish gliding through shadows, unaware of their fate. You think briefly about the strange balance of life here, how every creature, big or small, must take something to survive. Even the crocodile has its place, though you prefer not to meet one personally. You pull the net in, the cords heavy and glistening. This catch is good larger fish this time, enough to trade and still bring some home. You feel a small surge of pride, quiet and deep. You do not cheer like Mena, but you allow yourself a smile. The morning sun gleams brighter, the mist long gone. You can feel the warmth on your shoulders, the sweat beading along your temples. The Nile hums beneath you, endless and ancient, as if it approves. You rest the paddle again, content to float for a moment. The world around you glows with light and sound. The day stretches ahead, full of promise. You look down into the water, your reflection wavers, split by ripples, half real, half dream. And in that calm, golden stillness, you whisper a quiet thank you to the river that feeds and forgives in equal measure. The sun climbs higher, and the river begins to sparkle with a harsh white light. The mist that softened the morning has burned away, leaving everything sharp and clear. You squint against the glare, resting your paddle across your lap as you let the current guide you downstream. From here, the Nile looks endless. The banks stretch wide, fields of barley and flax rising beyond the tall reeds. Farmers in white linen skirts bend over their crops, their reflections trembling on the water's edge. The smell of warm mud and cut grain drifts faintly across the air. A hawk circles high above, riding a current of wind that never seems to touch you down here. Other fishermen are scattered along the water, their reed boats dark against the bright surface. You can tell who they are even from a distance. The way they move says everything. There's Dedi, always slow and methodical, pulling his net with exaggerated care. There's young Amen, who splashes too much and scares the fish before he even casts. And of course, Mena, who somehow manages to talk even when no one is near him. You can hear his laughter echo faintly across the current. You rest your elbow on the rim of the boat, watching them all with quiet amusement. The river may seem vast, but the community that lives from it is small. You know their faces, their habits, their favorite excuses when the catch is poor. It's a kind of floating village, a loose chain of boats that rises and falls with the river's mood. You dip your hand into the water, letting it slide between your fingers. The coolness surprises you, even under the heavy sun. You scoop up a little and splash your face. The relief is brief but sweet. From somewhere behind you comes the faint call of a woman's voice, sharp and clear. You turn to see a small raft drifting by, piled high with bundles of reeds. A young woman guides it with a long pole, pushing against the riverbed. Her arms are strong, her movements steady. She nods to you as she passes. Good fishing, good enough to pay the temple tax. You answer. She laughs, a quick sound that disappears into the air. Then you're luckier than my husband. The raft moves past, carried by the current, and soon she's no more than a small figure in the distance. You watch her go, thinking about how every person on the Nile carries a different burden. Some harvest its reeds, Some wash its clothes, some pray to it, and some, like you, simply live by its patience. A large splash pulls your attention back to the water. A crocodile's head breaks the surface a few dozen yards away, eyes gleaming like polished stones. It drifts silently, only the tip of its snout and the ridges of its back visible above the surface. You hold still, watching it glide. The river grows quiet around you, as if holding its breath. The creature passes without turning toward you, slipping beneath again with barely a ripple. You exhale slowly, your heart easing its pace. Encounters like that are common, but they never stop making your skin tighten. Historians still argue whether fishermen of your era truly feared crocodiles or considered them sacred symbols of the god Sobek. You, like most men of the Delta, choose a cautious middle path, respect without affection. Mena's voice carries faintly from downstream. "Did you see it?" he calls, laughter in his tone. "I saw you nearly wet yourself." "Old man," you shout back. His laughter rolls across the water again, breaking the tension. You shake your head, smiling, and reach for your jar of fish. The morning's work has gone well. The jar is nearly full now, the fish stacked neatly and shining in the sun. You open a small pouch of salt and sprinkle a bit over them, watching as it draws the moisture out. Salt is expensive, but it keeps the fish fresh until you return to shore. You remember your father explaining how traders bring it from the deserts far west, packed in camel hides. He said that even the gods would envy the taste of fish kept in good salt. You didn't believe him then, but now you understand. Preservation is survival. The wind picks up again, rippling across the water. You adjust the small sail you tied earlier, just a square of linen, patched and worn, but it catches the breeze well enough. The boat glides forward smoothly, cutting through the sunlight. You lean back for a moment, letting the rhythm of the movement lull you. The Nile hums beneath you, deep and constant. A dragonfly lands on the rim of your boat, its wings shimmering blue in the light. It stays just long enough for you to admire it before darting away. The river widens here, opening into a small lagoon. You steer toward the edge, where tall grasses sway in the shallow water. It's a good place to rest, quiet, hidden, and cool. You anchor the boat by wedging the paddle into the mud and lean over the side, trailing your fingers in the water. The world feels slower here. The sounds are softer, just the buzz of insects, the gentle slap of waves against reeds, and the distant cry of birds. You reach for a piece of dried bread from your small bundle, breaking it in half and chewing slowly. The taste is plain, but comforting. You think of home, of your wife, who will be hanging laundry by now, and of your children, who might be chasing the neighbor's goats again. The thought brings a quiet warmth that no sun can match. A small movement catches your eye, a ripple spreading near the edge of the lagoon. You watch it, curious. Then a head breaks the surface, a large fish, its scales glinting silver and bronze. It hovers there for a moment, as if daring you to move, before vanishing again. You grin to yourself. The river always saves a few surprises. A strange story floats back into your memory, one told by an old priest in a tavern years ago. He said that every fish caught on the Nile carries a fragment of the river's soul, and those who take too much will one day find their nets empty forever. It sounded like a sermon meant to guilt fishermen into donating more to the temples. Still, part of you wonders if there's some truth in it. The breeze grows stronger. rustling the reeds. You stretch your legs and look out over the shimmering water. The sunlight has lost its gentleness now, the air beginning to press heavily on your skin. Sweat beads at your temples and drips slowly down your neck. It will be midday soon. The river changes at midday. Its voice grows slower, its creatures more cautious. Even the wind seems to hold still. You can feel it coming, the shift from morning freshness to heavy stillness. You tighten the lid of your fish jar and adjust the sail once more, ready to move on before the heat truly settles in. As you push the paddle into the water again, the sound echoes across the quiet lagoon. The boat glides forward, smooth and steady, leaving behind a thin line of ripples that fades slowly back into calm. You glance toward Mena's distant shape, half hidden by glare and haze, and think how every fisherman on this river lives the same day in different ways. Bound together by the same water, the same sun, the same endless hum of the Nile. The sun sits high now, heavy and merciless above the water. The light strikes everything flat and white, and the surface of the Nile gleams so brightly it almost blinds you. You narrow your eyes, squinting at the shimmer as you steer the papyrus boat toward a shaded inlet near the reeds. The air feels thicker, the sound of insects louder, almost like the world itself is holding its breath. You dig the paddle into the mud and let the boat rest. The shade from a tall stand of papyrus gives you brief relief from the glare. Here, the water is darker, calmer. The hum of the wind fades, replaced by the croaks of frogs and the distant calls of unseen birds. You sit still, breathing slowly, feeling the sweat roll down your arms. The midday lull is always the hardest part of the day, not because of the heat alone, but because everything seems to stop. Even the river quiets, as if saving its strength. The fish sink deeper, the birds vanish into the trees. Only the insects continue, relentless in their droning chorus. You reach for your small jug and take a careful sip of warm water. It tastes faintly of clay and dust, but it helps. You pour a little over your hands, rubbing away the grit from the rope burns. The smell of the river clings to your skin, a mix of wet earth, sun-baked weeds, and fish oil. It's the scent of your life, and though it never leaves, you've stopped noticing it long ago. Something moves near the reeds, a rustle, soft but deliberate. You turn your head slowly, your eyes narrowing. A flash of scales, a ripple in the still water. Then silence again. You grip your paddle, not out of fear, but caution. The Nile is home to many creatures, and not all are kind. A long snout breaks the surface first, then to gleaming eyes. A crocodile, not large, but close enough that you feel the hair on your arms rise. It drifts lazily, half submerged, its tail cutting slow patterns through the shallows. You hold your breath and stay perfectly still. The creature seems to look right at you, unblinking. Then, after a long moment, it turns and slides beneath the water again, vanishing completely. You let the air escape your chest in a slow exhale. Encounters like this are a reminder the river feeds, but it also takes. There are stories of fishermen who vanished with no trace, their boats found days later drifting empty. The priests call it sobixdu, the price for trespassing too boldly into his waters. You prefer to think of it as simple balance. The river gives what it will and keeps what it must. You wait a few minutes longer, listening to the wind stir faintly again. When the surface of the water looks calm enough, you lean back, resting your head against a bundle of reeds. The air hums with heat. The sound of your own breathing becomes slow, rhythmic, almost hypnotic. Historians still argue whether ancient fishermen of the Nile carried charms for protection against crocodiles, or relied only on ritual and faith. Some fragments of text mention clay amulets shaped like the god Sobek's head, meant to ward off his bite. You have never owned one yourself. You trust your eyes more than charms. Still, you can't deny the way your fingers twitch toward the small fish amulet tied at your neck. Habit is stronger than belief sometimes. From your shaded spot, you watch the surface of the river glimmer and twist. The play of light almost looks alive, like the river is breathing under its own skin. You think about how old it is, older than the Pharaohs line, older than the stories carved into the temple walls. The Nile has seen kingdoms rise and fall, yet its water always flows the same. That thought brings a quiet comfort. A sudden splash breaks the stillness. Not a crocodile this time, a hippo, half hidden in the tall reeds across the water. Its round shape rises like a boulder before dropping again with a grunt that echoes across the inlet. The water churns around it, sending waves toward your small boat. You rock gently with them, steadying your balance. A grin tugs at your mouth. Hippos are worse than crocodiles in their way, bigger, angrier, and far less predictable. Yet somehow, you've always liked them. Maybe because they remind you that not everything powerful in this river is meant to be feared. Some things just exist, enormous and indifferent. The hippo moves off after a while, the sound of splashing fading into the distance. You're left again with the buzz of insects and the slow hum of the afternoon. The air smells thick with pollen now, sweet but cloying. You swat a mosquito from your arm and sigh. You reach for the small pouch of bread at your side, tearing off a piece. It's hard and dry, but hunger dulls any complaint. You chew slowly, staring at the water. The reflection of the sun dances in the ripples, making it hard to tell where the light ends and the river begins. As you eat, your mind drifts to stranger thoughts. You imagine the creatures beneath the surface, the unseen world of fish, eels, and old, sunken things. Some fishermen swear they've pulled up pottery so ancient it crumbled to dust in their hands. Others claim to have seen statues with faces half-erased by time. The Nile keeps its secrets well. A fringe belief you once heard from a traveling merchant comes to mind. He said that, deep in the delta, there's a spot where the water never warms, even at the height of summer. They call it the river's heart. Those who find it, he said, can hear the voices of every soul the Nile has ever taken. You never knew whether to laugh or shiver at the thought. The heat presses heavier now. You pull your linen cloth over your head for shade and close your eyes, just for a moment. The sound of the water lapping against the boat mixes with the steady hum of the wind. For a brief while, you drift between waking and sleep, your thoughts dissolving into the rhythm of the river. When you open your eyes again, the light has shifted. The sharp white of noon has softened to a deep gold. Shadows stretch long across the water, and the air feels lighter, cooler. Somewhere far off, you hear the cry of a heron returning to its nest. The stillness of midday is breaking. The river is moving again. You stretch your arms, feeling the stiffness in your shoulders ease. The crocodile and the hippo are gone, leaving only the calm hush of water and reeds. You dip your paddle back into the water, pushing gently away from the shade. The boat glides forward, ripples spreading in smooth circles behind you. The current welcomes you again, steady and strong. The worst of the heat is passing, and the afternoon promises new work and perhaps new stories. The Nile breathes around you, wide and timeless, and you breathe with it. The afternoon heat softens into a warm haze as you guide your boat toward the broader stretch of the Nile. The river's surface glows bronze now, rippling like silk in the shifting light. The breeze carries the faint scent of baking clay from distant kilns and something sharper, maybe crushed reeds or fish drying on open racks somewhere along the bank. You dip your paddle lazily, letting the motion slow your thoughts. The sound of each stroke blends with the hush of the current. The Nile has moods. You've learned, gentle in the morning, stubborn by noon, and thoughtful by afternoon. This is the hour when it almost seems to speak, when the echoes of everything living along its edges seem to hum in quiet agreement. Your arms ache pleasantly from the morning's work. You stretch them, rolling your shoulders. The sun sits lower now, and the sharp glare has faded to gold. The world looks softer, less certain at its edges. You feel it in your chest too, that calm, hollow kind of tiredness that comes only from doing something you were meant to do. You steer toward a small sandbank near the middle of the river, where the current slows and the air smells faintly of salt and wet grass. It's a familiar place, a resting point you've used many times before. You wedge your paddle into the sand and let the boat come to a stop. The soft hiss of water against reeds fades to stillness. You climb out carefully, your feet sinking into warm, fine sand. The bank is small, shaped like a crescent moon, half shadowed by a few tall reeds that sway gently in the breeze. You stretch again, feeling the stiffness leave your back. The world around you is alive. Dragonflies flicker through the light, and the sound of small frogs comes from somewhere nearby. You open your basket and check the morning's catch. The fish glistened faintly in the light, their scales shifting between gold and silver. You've done well, enough to trade, enough to eat, and enough to satisfy the temple's tax collector. That last thought makes you snort quietly. The river provides for everyone, but somehow the temple always takes the best part. Historians still argue whether those old river taxes were fair or just another way for priests to keep their storehouses full. You imagine some scholar far in the future debating the same, while you sit here sweating over real fish. It's an amusing thought. You find a flat patch of sand and sit, leaning back on your elbows. The sky stretches endlessly above, the blue deepening as the day moves on. A few white clouds drift lazily toward the horizon. You take out a small loaf of barley bread from your pouch, hard at the edges but still soft in the middle. You tear it in half and eat slowly, savoring the dry, earthy taste. The sound of a reed flute drifts faintly over the water. You look up and see a boy on another sandbank, sitting cross-legged and playing to himself. The melody is simple, repeating, but it fits the rhythm of the river perfectly. You watch him for a while, wondering if he's one of the shepherds from the western fields. Music travels easily here, just like stories and gossip. You take another bite of bread, then reach for your water jug. You pour a little over your head, letting it run down your neck. The shock of coolness makes you gasp and laugh quietly. For a brief moment, it feels like the whole world sighs in relief with you. The shadows of the reeds grow longer, stretching across the sand like thin black fingers. The air hums softly with the movement of insects. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of the ground seep into you. The smell of earth and river fills your lungs. You could almost fall asleep here if the day weren't slipping by so quickly. Your thoughts wander to your wife, your children, and your small hut that waits at the edge of the village. You imagine your daughter helping her mother salt the fish, your son trying to steal pieces when he thinks no one is looking. The image makes you smile. You wish they could see the river from here, wide and golden, alive with its quiet heartbeats. Something rustles behind you. You turn your head slightly and see a lizard dart across the sand, its tail drawing a quick, thin line before it disappears under a rock. You chuckle softly. Even here, where everything feels still, life hides in every shadow. A faint breeze picks up, carrying with it the smell of cooking fires from distant villages. You can almost taste the smoke and roasting grain. It stirs your hunger again. You reach for a strip of dried fish from your bundle, chewing it slowly. The salt and smoke mix on your tongue. It's simple food, but it feels earned. A fringe detail you once overheard from an older fisherman comes to mind, that the smell of roasting fish travels farther over water than over land. He claimed that the gods made it that way so even the poorest man could share his meal in spirit with those who were hungry. You never knew if he was joking or just drunk, but the idea has stuck with you ever since. The flute's song drifts away, replaced by the rhythmic croak of frogs beginning their evening chorus. The sun lowers and the water turns copper. You stand slowly, brushing sand from your legs, and step back into your boat. The papyrus creaks softly under your weight, familiar and forgiving. You push off from the sandbank, the paddle dipping into the cooling water. Ripples spread behind you, widening into quiet rings that catch the fading light. The world feels gentler now. The heat is leaving, the wind returning. You can smell the faint sweetness of lotus flowers somewhere upstream. As you glide through the calm water, you notice how the shadows of birds stretch long across the surface. They move lazily, wings spread wide, gliding with the same ease you envy. The frogs grow louder, and soon their rhythm fills the air, blending with the soft splash of your paddle. You know it's time to turn back soon, to trade your catch before the light fades completely. But for now, you let the boat drift just a little longer. The river hums beneath you, steady and alive, and your thoughts begin to slow again. Somewhere deep in the water, fish glide unseen. The reeds whisper, the sky begins to change color, turning from gold to soft rose. You breathe it all in, slow and full, like a prayer you don't need words for. The Nile carries you onward, toward the quiet promise of evening. You paddle slowly toward the western bank, where the air smells faintly of smoke and baking bread. The light of the afternoon begins to thin, turning the world softer, quieter. The sun still burns low in the sky, painting the surface of the Nile with streaks of bronze and fading gold. This is the hour when work slows, when every sound feels more distant, more deliberate. The boat drifts gently as you find a shallow patch near a sandbar. You push the paddle into the mud to anchor yourself and reach for the bundle tied near your feet. Inside are your midday provisions, a piece of barley bread, a few dried figs, and a small jar of beer that has warmed in the sun. It's a poor man's meal, but you've never complained. The river makes food taste better. You step out carefully, the sand squelching between your toes. The shore here is narrow and half hidden by papyrus reeds. You spread your small cloth on the ground and sit, cross-legged, facing the water. The river moves slowly now, its broad surface gleaming like melted copper. Every ripple catches a piece of sunlight before it fades into shadow. A heron lands nearby, its long legs dipping into the shallows. It stands still, watching you with one pale, unblinking eye. Then it turns and dips its beak into the water, snatching a fish in one quick motion. The splash startles you slightly, but you can't help but admire the precision. No net, no waiting, just instinct. You almost envy it. You take a bite of bread. It's rough and dry, crumbling against your teeth. You wash it down with a sip of beer, sour, thick, but satisfying. Your body relaxes with the first mouthful. You can feel your shoulders unclench, the ache of the morning fading under the quiet rhythm of chewing. A faint voice calls across the water. It's Mena drifting closer in his boat. He's singing something off-key, a fisherman's chant that sounds older than memory. You raise your hand in greeting as he nears the shallows. Stopping already? He asks, resting his paddle across his knees. Just long enough to eat before the river eats me, you reply. He laughs, shaking his head. You always talk like the Nile is listening. Maybe it is, he grins. Then tell it to give me more fish. The two of you share a moment of easy silence, broken only by the lapping of water against the reeds. Mena pulls a small wrapped bundle from his boat and joins you on the shore. Inside are roasted beans, a handful of onions, and another clay jar of beer. He sets them between you, and together you eat in the kind of silence that comes from long familiarity. The sun dips lower. Shadows lengthen across the sand. A flock of ibis birds flies overhead, their wings flashing white against the orange sky. The sound of their calls fades slowly, echoing across the open water. Mena wipes his hands on his cloth and sighs. The tax collectors will come again soon, he says. They say the temple needs more offerings this season. You shake your head. The temple always needs more. The gods must be hungry. He snorts, then chuckles quietly. You'll get struck by lightning one of these days. You glance up at the clear sky and smile faintly. If the gods had time to listen to fishermen, the world would be kinder. Historians still argue whether ordinary men in your time truly resented the temples or accepted them as part of the natural order. You imagine they've never seen a scribe's face when you hand over a jar of your best catch and get a receipt written in words you can't even read. The priests talk about balance and duty, but balance feels lighter when you're the one holding the scale. Mena drains his beer and stands. I should head back before the wind changes. You nod. Save me a place by the market fire tonight. He waves without looking back, pushing his boat into the current. The water takes him quickly, his figure shrinking against the glow of the setting sun. You watch until he becomes only a dark shape drifting into gold. You stay a little longer. The quiet feels sacred in its own way, not the kind of holiness the priests speak of, but the kind that belongs only to men who work with their hands and wait for things they can't control. A fringed tale comes to mind, one you once heard from an old woman who sold herbs near the docks. She said that when the river turns gold like this, it means the spirits of the drowned are rising to watch the living, that they like to see who still remembers them. You glance at the glowing surface, half smiling, half wary. Maybe she was right. The wind stirs the reeds. The smell of the river deepens, sharp with mud and life. You gather your things, brushing sand from your cloth. The beer jar is empty, the bread gone. You feel full, content in a quiet, heavy way that doesn't need joy to feel complete. You push the boat gently from the sandbank and climb in. The papyrus creaks, bending slightly under your weight. You pull the paddle free from the mud and steer into the main current once more. The sun now hangs just above the horizon, the light soft and red. The river hums beneath you, slower now, calmer. You paddle lazily, no longer working, just moving because motion feels natural. The air cools, carrying the scent of faraway fires. Villagers will be preparing their evening meals now. Somewhere, laughter rises faintly, blending with the chorus of frogs. You look at the water, at your reflection rippling and breaking with every stroke. You think of how many men have lived this same day, how many will live it after you are gone. The river remembers them all, in its slow, quiet way. The sky deepens from gold to rose, then to purple. The first star appears, trembling faintly above the horizon. You lift your head toward it and whisper something wordless, not a prayer, not even a thought, just a sound. The Nile carries you onward, as it always does, toward the gathering dark and the waiting shore. The sun finally slips below the horizon as you guide your boat toward the eastern bank. The world cools by slow degrees, the heavy air giving way to a gentle, breathing wind. The light on the river turns from gold to copper, then to a deep grey blue that shimmers like silk when the current shifts. This is the hour when work changes shape. No longer about catching or waiting, but about trade, exchange, and quiet negotiation. The shore ahead glows with the flicker of torches and small fires. It is not yet night, but the first lanterns already hang from poles along the dock. The scent of burning oil and cooking fish reaches you long before the voices do. You recognize it instantly. The smell of the river's commerce. You paddle closer, hearing the steady murmur of traders, the soft splash of other boats coming in, and the rhythmic thud of crates being lowered onto the wooden planks. The dockside comes into clearer view, baskets of glistening fish stacked in rows, scales catching the firelight, clay jars of salted eels waiting for inspection. Scribes sitting cross-legged with their styluses poised, ready to count every catch and tax every man. You steer your boat into an empty space between two larger vessels and secure it with a loop of rope. The wood of the dock creaks underfoot as you climb out. The air here is thick with heat, smoke, and the scent of labor, sweat, oil, and salt. A young boy rushes past, carrying a basket half his size, calling for his father. You step aside, watching him disappear into the maze of shadows and firelight. There's an energy here that you never feel on the water, a kind of restless human tide moving in rhythm with the river itself. You lift your jar of fish carefully, balancing it on your hip, and make your way toward the merchant's table. Behind it sits a man you know well, hoary, a trader with a permanent scowl and an uncanny ability to notice every missing coin. His head is shaved smooth, his linen robe clean despite the dust and smell that hangs everywhere else. "You're late," he says without looking up, scratching a note onto his tablet. "I brought the river with me." "It doesn't hurry for anyone," you reply. He snorts. finally glancing at your jar. Let's see what it's given you today. You set it down, removing the lid. The smell of fresh fish fills the air, sharp and strong. Hori leans forward, poking through the catch with his stylus like a priest inspecting an offering. He grunts, neither pleased nor displeased. Good size, he says, finally. Not much weight, though. The temples will take 2 jars this week. You can keep one. You bite back a comment, settling for a thin smile. And how generous of them, Hori smirks. Be grateful they take it. The gods bless the giver more than the keeper. You almost laugh, but instead just nod, counting the small coins he places on the table. They gleam dully in the firelight, heavy and unimpressive. You scoop them up and tuck them into your pouch. Historians still argue whether the fishermen of the Nile were fairly compensated for their work or kept deliberately poor to feed the wealth of temples. You imagine those scholars debating it under shaded courtyards, never once lifting a net or rowing a boat. You wish you could invite them here to smell the smoke, feel the ache in their arms, and see how fairness tastes when it comes with mud between your toes. You turn from the merchant and weave through the crowd. Traders shout over one another, voices rising and falling in the smoky dusk. A man nearby haggles loudly over the price of dried perch. A woman counts out coins for a basket of river crabs. Her hands quick and practiced. The fires cast long shadows on the walls, making everything seem larger, livelier, more ancient. You pass a small group of children sitting near the water's edge, sorting shells by shape and color. One of them looks up and grins at you. You toss him a small coin. His eyes widen and he laughs, clutching it tightly. For a brief moment, you see yourself there, small, barefoot, watching your father unload his catch with the same mix of wonder and fatigue. The night deepens. Stars begin to appear, faint at first, then stronger as the last of the sun's glow fades from the west. But the fires along the dock burn brighter against the dark. The voices grow louder, the laughter freer. Someone nearby starts to play a stringed instrument, and a few traders join in with clapping and half-sung words. You make your way toward the edge of the market, where the noise is less harsh. There's a small stall run by an old woman who sells bread, beer, and sometimes sweet cakes when the grain is plentiful. You greet her with a nod, and she smiles with only a few remaining teeth. "Another long day?" she asks. "As long as the river," you answer. She pours you a cup of beer from a clay jug, the froth spilling slightly over the rim. It's warm, sour, and perfect. You sit on the low bench beside her stall, sipping slowly as you watch the chaos of the dock continue. A fringe rumor passes between 2 merchants nearby. They speak in low voices, but you catch enough to piece it together. Talk of soldiers moving closer to the delta, of trouble in the south. You've heard such stories before. They always come and go like the flood, never changing the flow of your small life. Still, the mention of war makes the night air feel slightly heavier. You take another drink and glance toward the river. The water glows under the reflection of torchlight, flickering like molten metal. For all the noise and motion on the shore, the Nile itself remains calm, patient, eternal. A group of fishermen sits nearby, eating and laughing. You recognize Mena among them, gesturing wildly as he tells some exaggerated tale. You wave to him, and he lifts his cup in reply, his grin wide even in the dim light. You finish your beer and set the cup down. The air smells thick with smoke and life, human, imperfect, beautiful. You stretch your arms and look once more toward the water. The river's dark surface reflects the stars now, broken only by the occasional ripple of a passing boat. The market will go on for hours, but your body already asks for rest. You'll trade stories later, when the fires burn lower and the night feels soft again. For now, it's enough just to breathe, to feel the world settle into its evening rhythm. The Nile, ageless and tireless, carries it all. The laughter, the labor, the quiet exhaustion. Like a song, it never forgets. By the time you leave the dock, the torches are burning low, their light wavering in the rising wind. The crowd has thinned. Most fishermen have packed up their goods or traded their earnings for bread, beer, or quiet conversation. The shouts of merchants fade behind you as you follow the narrow dirt path that leads from the river toward the village. The ground beneath your feet is still warm from the day's heat, but the air has cooled. The smell of wet earth mixes with the faint scent of cooking fires. Somewhere close, someone is roasting fish. The smoke drifts through the night in slow, spiraling ribbons. The path winds through a small grove of palm trees, their fronds rustling gently above. You pass a group of children still awake, playing with sticks in the dust. Their laughter feels softer than the noise of the dock, lighter, purer somehow. One of them pauses to wave as you walk by. You nod, smiling, too tired for words. The huts come into view, their mud walls glowing faintly in the starlight. They're small, clustered close together, their roofs low and rounded. It's the same village you've always known, quiet, half asleep, but alive in its own steady rhythm. A dog barks once, then falls silent. The frogs sing from the reeds beyond, their voices steady as a heartbeat. You step through the narrow lane between the huts, the packed earth cool beneath your bare feet. You can hear faint murmurs from within, families sharing their evening meals. The soft clatter of pottery, the hiss of fire. A breeze moves through the gaps in the walls, carrying whispers of laughter and the faint sweetness of baked bread. Your own house stands near the edge of the village, facing the river. Its walls are simple, the same mud and straw as everyone else's. But the sight of it still warms something deep inside you. The door curtain moves slightly in the wind, and a small lamp glows faintly within. When you enter, the first thing you notice is the smell. Warm grain, wood smoke, and the faint tang of fish. Your wife sits by the hearth, her hands busy tying a small bundle of herbs. She looks up as you step in, her expression calm but welcoming. "You're later than usual," she says, her voice low, not scolding but tired. "The river took its time letting me go," you answer, setting your basket down by the wall. She smiles faintly. "The river always does." You sit beside her, stretching your legs. Your youngest child, barely 5, sleeps on a woven mat near the corner, his small hand clutching a piece of reed toy. The older one sits cross-legged by the fire, carefully threading shells onto a string. She looks up, eyes bright. "Did you see a crocodile today?" You grin. "I saw one, and it saw me. We both decided to keep our distance." She laughs softly, and your wife shakes her head, half amused. "Stop filling their heads with tails. You'll have them afraid to swim again." "Better fear than missing fingers," you reply. Historians still argue whether families like yours lived in comfort or hardship, whether your huts were homes or shelters. The truth lies somewhere in between. Life is not measured in walls or coins, but in the quiet understanding shared over small fires, in the hands that mend nets and wash wounds without counting the hours. Your wife places a small bowl of stew in front of you, lentils, onions, and a few scraps of fish from yesterday's catch. You take a bite, closing your eyes as the warmth spreads through you. It's simple food, but after a day on the water, it feels like a feast. The older child leans closer. "Tell a story," she says, her voice soft but insistent. You glance at your wife, who smiles and nods. Just one. Then sleep. You lean back, thinking. The fire crackles softly, casting shadows on the walls. The frogs outside keep their rhythm, and the night air hums with the faint sound of the river. There was once a fisherman. You begin, your tone slow and even, who thought he could outsmart the river. He said to himself, "I'll throw my net at night when the fish sleep. I'll catch more than anyone." So he went out in the dark and cast his net. But the river was awake, as it always is. When he pulled it back, he found not fish, but stars caught in the cords. They shimmered and whispered to him until he grew afraid. He threw them back into the water, but ever since, the river glows a little at night, just to remind him who's really in charge. Your daughter's eyes widen. Did that really happen? You smile. Ask the river next time you go to fetch water. It might tell you. Your wife chuckles quietly, shaking her head as she covers the pot. You make them dream too big. Better big dreams than none at all, you murmur. She sits beside you then, her hands still faintly smelling of herbs. You both listen to the night for a while, the soft wind through the reeds, the croaking, the faint rush of water against the bank. It's the same sound you grew up with, the same sound your children will hear long after you're gone. A strange thought passes through your mind, how the Nile has shaped everything about you, from your hands to your voice. The river doesn't just feed your body, it writes its rhythm into your bones. You wonder if one day, when you are gone, your children will still hear it when they sleep. The quiet murmur of moving water, the steady pulse of a living God. You reach for your pouch and pull out a small coin, placing it in your wife's hand. "For the market tomorrow," you say. She nods, her fingers brushing yours. "Rest. You've earned it." The fire burns lower. The air cools. You lie back on your mat, the faint light of the lamp flickering against the ceiling. The frogs continue their chorus, endless and soothing. The village outside sleeps, but the Nile never does. Its voice hums quietly through the walls, steady and eternal, like a lullaby meant for the living. The stars hang low over the river, their reflections trembling on the water like scattered fireflies. The night is still young, but the village has quieted. You rise from your mat, stretching your arms, and step outside into the cool darkness. The air smells of smoke, water, and faint traces of crushed lotus drifting from the bank. You walk slowly toward the river, barefoot on the packed earth. The sound of frogs fades as you move closer to the open current, replaced by the low, endless murmur of the Nile itself. It's not loud, but it fills everything. A sound so constant it feels like silence wearing a rhythm. You reach the small altar that stands near the shore. It's simple, a clay bowl placed atop a flat stone, surrounded by pebbles smoothed by the current. It isn't much, but it's enough. Every fisherman in the village leaves something here when the day ends. You kneel beside it, feeling the damp earth cling to your knees. Their scent rises faintly in the air, mixing with the river's own breath. Beside them, you place a few fish scales that glint in the moonlight. Small things, but sincere tokens of gratitude and humility. You bow your head and whisper. Not words of worship, not the grand invocations of temple priests, but something simpler, more human. Thank you for what you gave, you murmur, and for what you didn't take. You watch the small ripples move across the surface until they vanish into the dark. A shadow shifts nearby. You turn your head slightly and see Mena walking toward you, his steps slow and quiet. Couldn't sleep either, he asks softly. He chuckles, lowering himself beside you. My wife says the Nile calls to men more than their families do. She's not wrong. You both sit in silence for a moment, listening. The moonlight paints the world in shades of white and silver. Far across the river, you can see faint lights. Maybe another village, maybe just reflections of the stars. The water moves between you and them, a long, shifting mirror that connects everything. Mena pulls something from his bag, a small cup and a jug of beer. For the gods, he says, pouring a little into the bowl beside your offering. Then, with a grin, he pours some for you both. And for us, you take the cup and sip. The beer is warm, bitter, but familiar. It tastes like a day's end, rough, honest, earned. The priests say Sobek demands bigger offerings this season. Mena says after a moment. A few of the men plan to slaughter a goat at the next full moon. You shake your head. The river doesn't care for blood. It only remembers what it gives and what it takes. The rest is noise. He hums in agreement. Still, it makes them feel safe. Even false safety is worth something. Historians still argue whether these small riverside rituals were true acts of faith or just habits passed down from generations too old to question. To you, the difference hardly matters. Faith is not a declaration. It's the rhythm of small gestures repeated until they become part of breathing. Mena sets down his cup and leans back, watching the stars. Do you ever wonder, he says quietly, what happens to the ones who fall into the river? The ones who don't come back? You think for a moment before answering. They stay here, you say simply. The river keeps them. The water remembers everyone. He nods, satisfied with that. The night wind picks up, rustling through the reeds. Somewhere downstream, a fish jumps, splashing briefly before silence returns. You both watch the ripples spread. Mena smiles faintly, his eyes half closed. When I die, he says, I want them to set me afloat on my boat. No priest, no chanting, just the river. You glance at him, your voice softer now. If I'm still here, I'll make sure of it. And if you go first, then I'll whisper your name into the current. He laughs quietly, not mockingly, but with the warmth of someone who's already made peace with the idea. Then we'll both get what we want. You finish the beer in silence. The moon moves higher, casting its pale light across the water. The river looks alive under it, every movement glinting faintly like scales. She said that when fishermen die, their spirits become part of the river's voice, whispering guidance to those still living. That's why the Nile never stops speaking. Every ripple, every wave, carries someone's story. You wonder if, perhaps, that's true. If the voice of the river is nothing more than the sum of every life it has ever touched. The thought makes the sound feel closer, more familiar. Menna stands and stretches. I should go before my wife wakes up and thinks I've run away. Tell her the river needed you. You reply. He grins, lifts his lamp, and walks back towards the village. You stay where you are, listening to his footsteps fade. The night deepens. The water reflects the stars perfectly now, so perfectly it's hard to tell which side of the world is real. You dip your hand into the river, feeling the coolness run through your fingers. It slides over your skin like silk, alive and endless. Good night, you whisper to it. A small wave laps against the bank, gentle and rhythmic, like an answer. The path from the river to the village tavern is a narrow line through the dark. You walk it slowly, your feet tracing the same route they've known since boyhood. The air feels thicker now, heavy with the smell of oil lamps, roasting grain, and faint hints of sweet date wine drifting from the open doors ahead. Somewhere nearby, a lute plays, lazy, unhurried, a tune that sounds like the river itself, if it ever decided to hum a song. The tavern sits on a small rise overlooking the water. Its walls made of rough clay and palm beams blackened by years of smoke. You push aside the reed curtain and step in. The air inside is warm, close, and alive with quiet laughter. Men sit cross-legged on woven mats, cups in hand, voices low but constant. The light from oil lamps wobbles on the walls, turning faces into half-shadows. Every table smells of beer and sweat and life after labor. You spot Menna immediately. He's at the center of it all, as always, telling a story far too dramatic to be true. His hands move wildly in the air, his eyes bright in the flickering light. When he notices you, he waves you over with a grin. Here he is, he calls, the man who claims the Nile talks to him more than his wife does. You shake your head, amused, and sit beside him. At least the Nile listens. Laughter ripples through the group. Someone slides a clay cup toward you, filled to the rim with frothy beer. You lift it in a small salute and take a sip. It's bitter, thick, slightly sour, and perfect. The room hums with the rhythm of shared stories. One man boasts about the size of a fish that slipped through his net. Another swears he saw a crocodile so large it could have swallowed a cow. Everyone laughs, knowing the lies and loving them anyway. Historians still argue whether these taverns were places of camaraderie or quiet rebellion, where men spoke truths too small for temples but too honest for silence. Sitting here, surrounded by laughter and smoke, you think they were both truth and rest, have always lived in the same corner of the night. You lean back, letting the sound of voices wash over you. The tavern smells like river salt and crushed dates. The walls hum faintly from the wind outside. It's the kind of place that makes the world feel smaller, easier to understand. Menna pours you another drink, his grin wide. Did you hear the news? He says, between sips. They say the floods this year will come early. The priests claim it's a blessing. Of course they do, you reply. Every flood is a blessing when you don't have to rebuild your house afterward. The men laugh again, the kind of laughter that hides the truth it carries. Floods mean life, the river bringing new soil, new hope. But floods also mean loss. Every man here has seen the Nile rise to high at least once, swallowing fields, homes, memories. A soft voice cuts through the noise. An older man sitting near the wall, quiet until now, speaks without looking up. The river doesn't care what we call it. Blessing, curse, it just moves. The laughter fades into a thoughtful silence. You glance at the old man. His hair is white, his skin drawn thin from sun and time. His eyes are sharp though, reflecting the lamp's glow. He continues, "I was a boy when the floods took my father's boat. He used to say, the Nile teaches through taking. You learn what you love by losing it first." No one argues. You take another sip of beer, the bitterness sharper now. The old man's words linger like the hum of the river itself, low, endless, impossible to ignore. Mena breaks the silence with a chuckle, lightening the air again. You see, even the river's ghosts want to join us tonight. The tension dissolves into laughter once more. Someone claps you on the shoulder. Another man begins to hum the same slow river tune from earlier. The voices join in, uneven but warm. You close your eyes briefly. The sound of the song mixes with the faint creak of the tavern walls and the occasional gust of wind slipping through the doorway. The melody isn't beautiful, not in any formal way, but it carries the weight of shared exhaustion and unspoken faith. You think about how the Nile runs through all of you, how it threads your lives together, as invisible and certain as breath. Every man here has thrown a net, cursed the wind, thanked the water, and feared it in equal measure. The river owns all of you, though none would admit it aloud. A fringe tale from your grandfather's time surfaces in your memory. He said that the Nile was not a river at all, but a sleeping serpent. Its movements are slow, its moods ancient. When it shifts, the earth changes with it. When it dreams, you feel it in your bones. You never believed him fully, but sitting here tonight, listening to the quiet heartbeat of the world outside, you almost do. The old man finishes his beer and stands, leaving a single coin on the mat before walking out. The door curtain sways in his wake. For a while, no one speaks. Then Mena sighs and grins. He's right, you know. We love this cursed river more than we admit. You raise your cup, then may it never stop cursing us. Laughter fills the tavern again. Cups clink, the smell of beer grows stronger. The night deepens, wrapping everything in the kind of warmth that has nothing to do with fire. Eventually, you step outside. The air feels cooler, cleaner. The stars stretch endlessly above, bright and sharp. The river gleams faintly in the moonlight, still and wide, as if it's been listening all along. You stand there for a while, breathing in the quiet. The laughter from inside drifts through the night, mixing with the sound of water and frogs. Everything feels exactly as it should, imperfect, eternal, alive. You take one last look at the Nile before heading home. The river reflects the stars perfectly, as though trying to remind you that heaven and water are just two mirrors facing each other. And between them, you, one small fisherman, carried by both. By the time you return home, the fire in the hearth has burned down to a faint orange glow. The air inside the hut is still warm, the smell of grain and smoke lingering in the quiet. Your wife is asleep now, her breathing slow and steady, one arm draped loosely across your youngest child. The room is dim, peaceful, filled with the kind of silence that feels alive, the silence of people at rest after long, honest work. You move quietly, setting your pouch on the low table near the door. The sound of frogs outside fills the space like soft music. You sit down near the embers, stretching your legs. The heat from the dying fire brushes against your skin, gentle and comforting. For a long moment, you simply listen to the slow wind through the cracks in the wall, the faint rustle of reeds by the river, the shifting breath of those you love. Then you hear it, the whisper of a small voice. "Baba," your daughter says, half asleep, her words slurred by dreams. You smile and turn toward her. Still awake, she sits up a little, rubbing her eyes. "Tell another story," she murmurs, "just a small one." You chuckle softly. You never tire of stories. She shakes her head, her hair a tangle of dark curls. The river ones make the dreams quiet. You glance toward your wife, still sleeping, and then back to your daughter. "All right," you say softly. "A small one for quiet dreams." You pull a small reed from the bundle near the wall and roll it between your fingers as you begin. The rhythm helps the words come easier. "There was once a fisherman," you say, "who woke one morning to find that the Nile had vanished. The riverbed was dry, the fish gone, the reeds silent. He looked everywhere, but all he could see was dust. The people wailed, the priests prayed, but nothing brought the water back. So the fisherman walked and walked, following the empty river until he reached its source, a cave hidden deep in the desert. Inside, he found a small child sitting by a trickle of water. The child was weeping. The fisherman asked, "Why do you cry?" The child said, "I am the Nile, and I am tired. People take from me, but they never speak to me." The fisherman knelt and said, "Then let me speak for all of us." He told the river child stories of every life it had touched, of mothers washing clothes on its banks, of children splashing in the shallows, of farmers singing to the fields it fed. When he finished, the child smiled through its tears and said, "You remembered me. That's enough." And the river returned, stronger than before. You pause, watching her eyelids grow heavy again. "That's why we tell stories," you whisper, "to remind the river that we remember." Her voice drifts faintly through the quiet. "Did it really happen?" You smile. "Maybe, or maybe it's happening right now. Every night we fall asleep." Her breathing slows, her body softening into rest. You sit still for a while, listening. The night has its own rhythm, the low hum of crickets, the distant cry of an owl, the river whispering beyond the reeds. You reach for the small jar of water beside the hearth and pour a little onto the floor near the door. It's a habit your father taught you, a small offering before sleep, a gesture of thanks for the day. The water darkens the earth, then sinks in silently. Historians still argue whether such gestures were symbolic or superstitious. To you, it doesn't matter. It's the act that carries meaning, not the explanation. A man doesn't thank the river because he must. He thanks it because he wants to keep belonging to something larger than himself. You lean back against the wall, feeling the rough clay against your shoulders. The fire has almost died, just faint coals now, glowing like stars caught in the ashes. You stare at them, your thoughts slowing, softening. A faint breeze moves through the door, carrying the smell of the river. You close your eyes and listen to it, the slow pulse of water against the bank. It's the same sound that filled your childhood, that marked every morning and every night. It's the voice that has never stopped speaking. You think of all the fishermen still out there, some hauling in their last catch, some lost in the dark current, some whispering prayers to the same water that touches your feet. You wonder if they can hear it too, that low, endless hum that sounds almost like a heartbeat. A fringe belief you once heard surfaces again. They say the Nile never truly sleeps. Even when the world grows quiet, the river dreams for everyone who lives beside it. It carries those dreams in its current, sending them downstream to become new mornings. You like that idea that sleep isn't an end, just another way the river moves through you. The coals fade slowly, turning from orange to faint grey. The darkness grows complete. You lie back on your mat, the cool air brushing over you. The sound of the water drifts through the open doorway, steady and deep. The last thing you see before closing your eyes is your daughter's small hand curled beside her, still clutching a shell she found at the river's edge. You smile faintly. The river gives small gifts, and you've learned to recognize them. The night feels full of sound, of memory, of everything that waits to be remembered again tomorrow. The night folds itself gently around the village, soft and complete. Outside, the air has cooled enough that the earth breathes again, releasing the scent of clay and river grass. The stars gleam brighter now, countless and still, their light trembling faintly on the rippling surface of the Nile. You wake briefly before dawn. Not startled, just aware, the way fishermen often do, even in sleep. The world outside is quiet, except for the river's voice, steady and patient. You rise slowly, careful not to wake your wife or the children, and step out into the open air. The coolness wraps around you like water. The sky is vast and half-lit, a faint grey before the sun. The moon still lingers, low and pale, reflected in the slow-moving current. You walk barefoot toward the bank, the ground damp and soft beneath your feet. The reeds sway gently, whispering against one another, their tips silvered by starlight. You stop near the small wooden post where you tie your boat. It rests exactly where you left it, half submerged, creaking softly as the water moves beneath. You run your hand along the papyrus frame, feeling the cool dew on its surface. The smell of wet reed fills the air, sharp, clean, grounding. This hour, the one between night and day, feels like something the river invented. Everything holds still for a moment, as if the world is waiting to remember itself. You sit near the edge, watching the first hints of light begin to stretch across the eastern sky. A faint orange glow touches the horizon, turning the clouds soft and pink. The river mirrors it perfectly, rippling gold and silver. You think of your father again, of the mornings you spent watching him just like this. He used to say that every dawn is a kind of forgiveness, proof that the river still allows you to try again. You believe that more with each passing year. The Nile takes much, but it always gives you another morning. Historians still argue whether people of your time saw the sunrise as sacred or simply as another beginning. You think maybe it's both. To live beside the river is to understand that every repetition carries meaning. The world doesn't change much here, but the sameness itself is its comfort. You look down at your reflection, broken and mended by the ripples. The water glows brighter as the sun climbs higher. The day will come soon. Work, heat, movement, but for now, everything is soft. The frogs have grown quiet, replaced by the first calls of birds waking in the reeds. A heron lands nearby, its wings outstretched and glimmering in the pale light. It stands motionless for a moment, then dips its beak into the water and lifts it again. droplets catching the dawn like glass beads. You smile faintly. The heron has been here longer than you, and will be here long after. A small wind moves across the surface, cool against your face. The river sighs, low and endless. You close your eyes and breathe in deeply water, earth, faint smoke from distant fires, the smell of your entire life contained in one breath. Behind you, the village begins to stir. A rooster calls. Someone's door creaks open. You can hear faint voices, muffled by distance, the first murmurs of the living world returning to motion. You stand, brushing the damp soil from your hands. Your wife steps into the doorway of your hut, her hair tied back, her face half lit by the coming sun. She smiles when she sees you. Already awake, you nod. The river called first. She laughs softly. It always does. She walks toward you, carrying a small basket. Inside are the morning's offerings, bread, onions, and a handful of figs wrapped in cloth. For the day, she says, handing it over. You take it, your fingers brushing hers. Thank you. Be home before dark, she adds. I'll try. She smiles again, the kind of smile that holds years in it, then turns back toward the house. You watch her go, the early light painting her shadow long against the earth. You step into your boat once more. The papyrus creaks in greeting, the water lapping gently against its sides. You place the paddle across your knees and push away from the shore. The motion is easy, familiar, almost part of you. The boat glides forward, carried by the slow pull of the current. The sun breaks the horizon at last, spilling gold across the world. The light strikes the water, the reeds, the distant huts, and finally, your face. You squint against its brightness, feeling warmth spread across your skin. The river comes alive again. Birds call sharply overhead. Small fish leap in flashes of silver. The air hums with new sound, morning sound. You dip your paddle into the water and begin to move with the rhythm that has guided every man before you. Push, glide, breathe, push, glide, breathe. A fringe belief passes through your mind that every sunrise on the Nile is the same one seen by the first fisherman. That the river holds time differently. You like the thought. It makes you feel less like a man and more like a thread in something larger, woven into the current itself. You glance toward the opposite bank. The palm trees shimmer in the heat already rising from the ground. A faint mist lingers just above the surface, glowing gold in the light. The world feels ancient and young all at once. The sound of the paddle dipping in and out of the water becomes hypnotic again, and soon you stop thinking altogether. You are simply there, one man, one river, one morning. The Nile stretches ahead, wide and unending, a path made of water and memory. The day is waiting, patient as always. And you, like every fisherman before and after, answer its call without a word. The sun has climbed high enough now that the water gleams with a hard white light, but the air still carries the softness of early morning. You paddle steadily, the motion slow and even, feeling the familiar pull in your shoulders. The Nile stretches ahead like a long shining road, bending and curving between green fields and quiet villages that rise like small islands of life along its edge. The day begins again exactly as it always does. But somehow, you never tire of it. Each sound, each smell, each glimmer of light feels slightly new, slightly changed by time's patient hand. The frogs are gone now. replaced by the sharper cries of birds circling overhead. You can see the distant shapes of other boats, dots moving against the gleam. The morning fleet of men who, like you, belong to this endless current. You pass the same sandbanks, the same reeds, where you rested yesterday, and will rest again tomorrow. The river has its roots, and so do you. The papyrus boat creaks softly as you move, its wet fibers expanding in the heat. You can feel the life of it under your feet, the faint vibration of the current pushing beneath. The catch will come later, but for now, the work is simple. You set the paddle across your lap, letting the current guide you for a while. The sun warms your face, the wind cools your back. The air smells of water and dust and distant smoke. A small fish jumps beside the boat, breaking the surface in a flash of silver before vanishing again. You smile faintly, watching the rings spread outward. "Too fast for me," you murmur. You hear voices somewhere upstream, faint laughter, shouts, the splash of paddles. Probably Mena and the others, already arguing about who will catch the biggest fish today. You'll join them soon, but for now, you let yourself drift. The Nile carries every sound, the birds, the wind, the hum of life in motion. All of it threads together until it feels like one endless song. You rest your hands on your knees and close your eyes for a moment, listening. The sound enters you, deep and familiar, like the echo of something you've always known. Historians still argue whether the fishermen of your age saw themselves as part of the Nile or apart from it. You know the truth lies somewhere quieter. The river isn't a god or a master, it's a companion, an ancient friend that remembers everything and forgives almost as much. You open your eyes. The light has grown stronger, cutting sharp lines through the water. A heron glides overhead, its wings long and silent. You watch it for a while, your paddle resting still. The bird moves without effort, each motion deliberate, as if guided by the same unseen rhythm that carries the current. You begin to paddle again. The motion feels easier than thought. The boat moves forward, the water parting in smooth arcs on either side. The world reflects itself perfectly in the river, sky above, sky below. And you caught somewhere between. A fringe story your father once told returns to you, quiet and unbidden. He said the Nile never forgets a face. Every man who looks into it leaves a reflection behind, and those reflections live deep under the surface, watching the living go by. When storms come, it's their laughter you hear. When the water calms, it's because they are sleeping again. You used to laugh at the story. Now, you're not so sure. You reach into the water with one hand, your fingers breaking the surface. It's cool and smooth, sliding over your skin like silk. You feel it tug slightly, as if recognizing you. You let it. Farther downstream, a small cluster of huts marks another village. You'll stop there by midday to trade a little. Maybe share a meal with friends. The day stretches ahead, predictable yet rich. You can almost feel its shape, the rhythm of work, of conversation, of quiet laughter. You glance toward the sky. The sun is bright now, but not harsh. The air hums softly, alive with the sounds of life beginning again. You breathe deeply, tasting it all. The warmth, the dust, the faint sweetness of river water. You realize, as you often do, that nothing about this life is small. It may seem quiet, uneventful, ordinary, but every detail carries a kind of peace you've never found elsewhere. The creak of the paddle, the shimmer of light on the surface, the slow breath of the earth around you. It's all enough. You look downstream again, the river stretching endlessly toward the horizon. The light glints on the water, dazzling and clean. You smile to yourself, feeling the weight of everything and nothing all at once. The Nile keeps flowing, the wind keeps moving, and you, one man among countless others, move with it, not against, not ahead, just with. You lift the paddle one last time, dipping it into the shimmering current. The motion is slow, graceful, familiar. The water parts, closes, and carries you onward. The world breathes with you. The day unfolds quietly. The river sings its patient song. And for now, that is all the truth you need. The sun sinks low again, and the Nile softens into shadow. The day exhales its last warmth as the air turns cool and full of sound. Crickets, frogs, the hush of the water sliding past, reeds. Your boat rests near the bank, still and weightless, like it too has grown tired of motion. You sit with your back against the woven reeds, watching the horizon fade into blue and silver. The sky holds a single star, then two, then 100, until the river mirrors the heavens once more. The smells of evening rise, smoke, wet clay, and the faint sweetness of lotus. You close your eyes, letting it all blur together. The warmth of the day, the sound of your paddle, the quiet laughter of your friends, the voices that belong only to water. You think of your family asleep in their hut, of the stories that will live longer than you will ever fish, of the endless rhythm that carries life forward, simple, steady, forgiving. The Nile moves still, humming softly like an old friend singing to itself. Its current slides past your feet, unhurried and eternal. You breathe deeply. The air feels cool against your skin, the kind that makes the body loosen and the mind grow still. The night presses closer, wrapping around you like water. The stars blur slightly. The river hums on. The world becomes small and quiet and kind. Sleep takes you slowly, like the current drawing you home.